Hey everyone, and welcome to week two. I want to just take a few minutes to talk about curriculum and program development and just kind of get you to think about and pick your brain on what you know already about curriculum and what you maybe don't know, because there is a lot that goes into curriculum design and program development and evaluation that we're going to touch on this semester. So, what is curriculum? We all know curriculum is something like a delivery. Nursing school is a lot like giving birth. Once it's over, you tend to forget how painful the process really was, though. So sometimes curriculum can be painful. Hopefully, it's not painful for those going through the process as bad as maybe as we would think. But we want it to be positive and to have the outcomes that we want. So I want you to just take 5 minutes and pause the video, and I want you to just write. This is a free write, and what a free write does is it helps you just kind of open up your mind to think about things that you maybe haven't thought of or things that are embedded down deep in there. So as you do this, what I want you to do is just write. I'm going to give you a prompt, and whatever comes to mind, even if you have to write blah, 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 I have no idea what to write, just keep writing until your 5 minutes is up. So set you a stopwatch or a timer, and I want you to pause for that full 5 minutes. Your prompt that I want you to write about is, as a nursing educator, curriculum is important because. So take a moment, set your stopwatch for 5 minutes, and I want you to just write and don't stop writing. All right. So now that you're back from your 5-minute break, I want to read to you. I also completed the 5-minute free write because I think it's important as an educator that we don't ask our students to do something that we wouldn't do ourselves. So I know that this process sometimes can be painful for those of you who do not feel like you're a writer, but at the same time, I think it is really valuable to help you understand where your thoughts and ideas are. So here are some of the things that I wrote in my free write. Now, keep in mind on a free write, if you were to use this as a nursing education tool, their grammar's not important, punctuation's not important. If there's errors in there, it doesn't matter. It's about getting the ideas on paper. And so there is no judgment as to what these should come out or look like, so don't judge me. But this is what I included as I wrote. So as a nursing educator, curriculum is important because curriculum is our blueprint. Some call it a guidebook or a map, but they direct our teaching learning processes. They provide foundations and ensure that critical components, things like values, morals, concepts, philosophies, missions, etc., are threaded throughout a program. Maybe, some might think of it as a picture quilt. Think of various threads individually. They seem small and maybe even meaningless, but woven together, it creates a bigger image, the blanket per se, covering all things. So without those individual threads, things like values, morals, concepts, philosophies, missions, you lose the final product. And that final product, of course, is a number of things. If you're in staff development, this could be competencies in certain areas. If you're looking at curriculum design for your BSN or 2-year ADM programs, maybe it's looking at RN graduates coming out as a safe, competent nurse. Or maybe in an MSN program looking at the outcomes of preparing advanced practice nurses in the roles of the concentration, specifically for our program, nurse education. So those are the things that I wrote. Now, your thoughts may be very different, and you can take a whole different path with these free writes. So I think I'll be using these throughout the semester, and I do think they're valuable in helping go through the process of your thought process and thinking through what you might want to focus on, or areas that your peers may focus on that you don't think about yourself. Again, no right or wrongs to free writes. They're just a way to get your brain jogged, maybe if you haven't had your coffee. So I have got my coffee. You've looked at the syllabus and calendar. One of the things that that you will know is, after being in courses, that a syllabus and calendar are fundamental to each of the classes, and classes are a small part of curriculum. Curriculum really is that bigger designed overview of the program. What do things look like when they're put together? Now, in order to put things together, of course, you have to have courses. And in those courses, you have to have things like syllabus and a calendar. Clearly, they're fundamental pieces for our students. And without those, the students don't have the guides to get them through the steps, because it's not the student's role to necessarily see the curriculum in the bigger overview and to understand how all that threads together. Now, as an MSN Nurse Educator student, you will be asked to learn about that and to understand how those pieces thread together. For example, when you design a program, let's talk about our MSN program, we have MSN program outcomes or goals. And so those are the top things that we want you, when you graduate, you should be able to say, yes, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. However, in order to get you to that point, we have to design objectives throughout that are going to build you to that level so that you can meet those outcomes. One of the ways we do this is through individual course outcomes. So these are the course learning objectives that you would see in your syllabi, and those are going to build into a bigger, possibly first level outcomes and second level outcomes, whether it be first year or second year, and into those larger program outcomes. So just food for thought. So as you are looking and reading about curriculum, I know you've read the Fast Facts curriculum part 1 and 2, and this week and next week you'll be reading the third part of that. It really kind of delves into what is curriculum, but I want you to step back and think about your experiences with curriculum and curriculum development. Many of you have been in an educator role of some kind, and so you may have had experience designing objectives and making sure that they meet that bigger picture for a program, or for competency-based education modules that lead to safe quality practice in nursing. You may not. Maybe you've only had experience as a student with curriculum. So some of the things that you hear, is that undergraduate curriculums are often very painful and difficult. Nursing programs are very hard and they're competitive. So these are some things that we hear continuously as educators, and being on the admission side, that often that is an experience that people have, or a perception they have about curriculum. Those that have completed curriculum development know this is not an easy task. Curriculum development does not happen overnight. In fact, it takes a significant amount of time, and for really strong, thoughtful curriculum development, it's going to take months and years to really come up with a program that meets those objectives and outcomes in a way that's beneficial for the learning of the student. So take a moment and write down, what are the positives and negatives associated with your experiences with curriculum, but also with curriculum development? Now, I read you my free write of kind of my thoughts of curriculum. Again, there's no right or wrong answer, but the definition of curriculum that we're going to look at here is, there's really 3 parts. 1 is a course of study, 2 being the interactions between and among teachers and students for learning to take place, and 3, that it's improvable in content and process, formally and informally, to the extent that learners gain knowledge, understandings, attitudes, appreciation, and values. So it is more than just which courses fall when and what objectives are there. It really is about threading all those pieces of values, attitudes, philosophy, mission, all the way through down to the courses, so that that broader outcome happens. One of the things you're doing in this next 2 weeks module is looking at curriculum design and the issues and factors that have influenced curriculum for nursing over the decades. So I don't want to go into depth about this, but I think there's some things to really think about, and some of the things that come to the forefront these days that you will see. One being safety. We know that safety and quality are critical measures in any kind of nursing environment, whether it be home health, whether it be acute, whether we are looking at ED versus PEDS versus ICUs. Safety and quality are number one. So there's the first two. One of the things that we have seen drastically in the last 15 years or so is that change of building in technology into our nursing world, which is also impacting curriculum design. And why is that? Well, we've become a society that relies on technology for a variety of things. And if you imagine back 20 years ago, what you had to do to get an answer to a question, you couldn't just pull out your phone and Google it or ask Siri, what is XYZ? You have to know that information or have ready access to that. And so what does that look like? And some people may have had it 15 years ago. I still had dial-up, so there was no hope for that 15 years ago for me. Again, the technology, the informatics piece, looking at the data coming in there. Another thing that we have seen and know is critical in our success and outcomes of our patients is the interdisciplinary approach, looking at interprofessional education. We know that in academic settings, it's often very siloed, and that individuals or individual departments do teach within what they're comfortable with. And so it's been hard to get people to break out and think, how can we creatively teach this where we're teaching people to work in teams and having that experience working in teams. So when they come out, there is those positive outcomes where people are really contributing what their discipline does best to that care of that patient. Health disparities, of course, is something that has been in the forefront of the health literature and what we've seen in nursing, but looking at the populations of people that have received less quality or safe outcomes based on a specific factor, whether that be a genetic factor or socioeconomic factor, and why that is. Why do we see that there are pockets of people that do not have access to care? Why do we see that there are pockets of people who do not get pre-screenings for cancer and get diagnosed later and have higher mortalities? Why is it that there are certain pockets of people that do not have access to healthy fruits and vegetables? Why is this? And so, these health disparity pieces really can go into any of the areas that you are looking at or that's your focus of population. We also have seen a shifting demographic population. So we know our populations are getting older, and that because they are getting older, you're also seeing more of the comorbidities in that population where there's different things impacting that health outcome, not just one problem, but multiple problems, multiple systems involved. And so what does that look like? We also know as nurses, the acuity level that we had in our patients 20, 25 years ago was a lot less than the acuity level of patients that we're seeing these days, part of that being that shifting demographic. And we do know, too, that we have much more evidence-based practice and literature in the nursing world and discipline to help guide our practice that is going to lead to that safety and quality that we need. So a few things to think about. How can, when you're talking about curriculum development or programs, how do you balance expectations between ideal and practical considerations? We know if you're talking about a 4-year nursing program, really only 2 years of that are going to be nursing concentrated education. And how do you teach everything a nurse needs to know in a 2-year period? How do you determine what you want to do versus what is really the practical consideration? Other things to think about that we'll be talking about over the next year, but specifically in this class and your education courses, are when you look at this curriculum design or program development, what teaching strategies are really most relevant for these particular learners? Every group of learners is different, and it also varies from group to group. So, for example, the group that is 1 year ahead of you in the cohort in the MSN really like to meet face-to-face. They are a face-to-face group. And there seems to be less of that desire of that face-to-face with your group, which is not, there's no right or wrong to that. It's about assessing particular learners and what these learners want. So that also gives some responsibility on the part of the learners to voice what they need for their teaching strategies as well. What's going to work for them? And also, you've got to think about too, how much flexibility should be included. So that really can vary depending on what kind of program it is, what the outcomes are, and your learner group as well. So take a few minutes. I want you to think through some other questions that you might think are relevant for curriculum design, and I will put a little forum blog up, a wiki, for you to actually add your questions that you think are really relevant for curriculum design and things that have been popping in your head as you've been reading the material. So we also do know that in the literature, there's been quite a bit of information that's came out in the last 10 to 20 years that have really changed our practice. And some of those reports, have really influenced the education, specifically in interprofessional education, and looking at that focus. So one of the ones to think about is that Institute of Medicine, The Future of Nursing, the Leading Change in Advancing Health report. So the recommendations included a lot of different pieces, but one of the things was implementing nurse residency programs, which we have seen a huge increase in, expanding the idea of nursing leadership and developing nursing leaders, having people practice at the top of their scope of practice. So, and that's at all levels. That's looking at nursing assistants, that's looking at nurses, that's looking at advanced practice nurses, that's looking at doctorally prepared nurses. How do you maximize those outcomes for that group? Increasing our number of BSN nurses to 80% of the population by 2020. We're almost at 2020, if you can believe. That seemed like such a long time ago when this report came out. We thought, oh, that's forever away, and we're almost here. Doubling the number of people with doctorate degrees in nursing as well, increasing engagement in lifelong learning, building workforce data infrastructure, and then, of course, building that partnership with other healthcare professionals. And that starts in education, curriculum design, program development. It doesn't just happen in that healthcare setting without that preface. The Bridge to Quality report from the Institute of Medicine also talked about how health education reform is really critical to enhancing the quality of our healthcare in the United States. When we look at the report, The New Health System for the 21st Century, some of the things that were focused in that one, we're focusing on quality-related issues and how healthcare delivery systems can be redesigned, really focusing on innovation and improvement of care, quality and safety again. And some of the things in the 4 areas that they really wanted to focus on were the infrastructure that supports dissemination and application of new clinical knowledge and technology, the information technology infrastructure, payment policies, and preparation of the healthcare workforce. Additionally, the focus of the report was the preparation on healthcare workforce and the need to reform clinical education. Again, getting people out of those silos, where nursing is not just teaching nursing, where nurses are actually in that simulation lab or in a clinical setting, working with doctors, working with PAs, working with respiratory therapists, working with physical therapists, working with occupational therapists, knowing what a speech language therapist or pathologist does, knowing how to maximize the scope of practice for each of the disciplines for that quality outcome. There are 3 issues that specifically were addressed. 1 was clinical training and education, 2 being regulation of health professions, and 3 being those legal liability issues. So you can read through that and have some thoughts. So I'm going to post a wiki for you guys to post your questions. I'll also provide an opportunity if you want to share your 5-minute free write. Again, no right or wrong. You do not have to share that. But if you think that would be helpful for your peers, or if you have something you'd like to add, I would love to read those. Thank you so much. I hope week 2 is off to a great start, and I'll be in touch. If you have questions, please let me know. Looking forward to seeing you guys soon.